that being said, we're going to start off with the Monday Night Football game, last game of the weekend, the Cowboys and the Buccaneers, which ended up not being much of a game as the Cowboys dominated the Bucs 31-14 in a victory.
Yeah, so this one came out and it started kind of pitifully, right? This one was 4 straight punts from both teams. Neither team was really getting anything going. The offense just couldn't get anything running. We saw how the first game of the year went with them, where it started also pretty slow. Dallas only put up a field goal in week 1. It was looking pretty grim. But then Dak Prescott caught fire and finished the game very impressively, 25 for 33, 305 yards, 4 touchdowns in the air. He also ran for 24 yards and got himself a touchdown on the ground, with a kind of an ode to Peyton Manning on the touchdown he did. Just a really good game for Dak Prescott as a whole. The receiving team obviously did really well amidst all that good passing. Dalton Schultz actually led with 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb got a touchdown. Michael Gallup got a touchdown. Both of them, CeeDee Lamb about 70 yards, Gallup about 50. Pretty good for them. On the ground, Zeke was probably not as productive as they wanted. 13 carries for 27 yards. On the other hand, though, Pollard got 15 carries, 77 yards. Neither of them got into the end zone. But still, they did a majority, a really good amount of work for the Cowboys as they kind of rolled over the Buccaneers here in Tampa after a slow start. Towards the end of the game, we see Brady and the Bucs try to put something together. They score late in the third quarter, try to go for 2. They don't get it. They come back. They score again. They go for 2, get the ball back after recovering an onside kick. And pretty much what they have to do here, get the onside kick, score, get the onside kick, score, get the onside kick, score. So you can see how it's grim. And I think even people who think, oh no, it's Tom Brady, are probably not that worried about the chances of a miraculous comeback. And it goes away immediately. Brady throws a bomb to Mike Evans. If Mike Evans catches it, maybe the stuff could have continued. It might have ended 31-21 instead. But it goes just out of Mike's hands. Game's over. Brady himself put up 351 yards, which really feels stat padded. Right, you have 35 passes, 35 completions on 66 passing attempts. Brady and the Bucs didn't really have many good drives. They had the 2 scoring drives. They had one where they almost scored, and then they put up this graphic to show how Brady in the red zone recently has had like 86 passing touchdowns, 7 rushing touchdowns, and no interceptions. As soon as the graphic left the screen, he threw a pick in the red zone, in the end zone, more specifically. So really a game they're going to want to put past them. Unfortunately, not much putting past to do here as the season ends. Maybe most surprisingly for the Bucs on the stat sheet is that Julio Jones scored a touchdown after a season of kind of doing nothing. But before I turn it back over, obviously I cover a lot of what's on the stat sheet when I do my part here in the beginning. And there's one part of the stat sheet that I unfortunately cannot ignore despite the big win for the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas kicker, Brett Maher, goes 1 for 5 on extra points, contributing a total of 1 point to the game. So as you would know by traditional football scores, just scoring a bunch of touchdowns, they should have had about 36 or 35 points. I mean, not 36. That's not good math. It should have been 35-14 had he made all of his extra points. There's even a point where there was a 4th and 4, and Mike McCarthy was like, "No, we're just gonna let the offense keep running." After he'd already missed like 4, I think. Does finally hit his 5th one. Dak on the sideline showed frustrations, wanting to go for 2, but the team did seem to kind of corral back with Brett Maher. I mean, that's the guy. He only missed 3 kicks in the whole season, and then he missed 4 extra points in this playoff game. So it's obviously that's not what we expect from Brett Maher. That's not what we're going to get going forward. It's going to be hard for him to put this behind him, though. And for a little bit, even though Brady was getting absolutely blown out in a playoff game, Brett Maher was the bigger story. However, the game ends 31-14. Brady goes home, and regardless of Brett Maher's terrible performance, he gets to move on to the next round and get another shot at it, and hopefully build up some confidence. Because in that game, as we'll discuss later, I think he's probably going to be needed for some field goal attempts that Mike McCarthy surely would not have given him towards the end of that Bucs game.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned it. Obviously, it didn't hurt him. I mean, a 31-14 victory instead of 35-14 didn't really make a difference in the end. But in a game, this weekend, obviously against the 49ers, that will matter. And if they make it past the Niners and play either the Giants or the Eagles, that'll definitely matter then, especially in the Super Bowl if they make it there. So they got lucky, missing that many extra. You miss 2, you're going to have a problem because a lot of these games now, ever since they've moved the extra points back. A lot of times they come down to a missed extra point making the difference, whether a team wins, loses, or has to go for two here, or has to go for a touchdown rather than a field goal. So it didn't matter here, but they're just lucky that they played so well on defense, so well on offense overall, that these special teams blunders are the only issues for them really in the game after those first two drives, which you mentioned it too. It was shaky to start. Tampa Bay, I kind of expected it. I understand they won the division. They won at 8-9. It wasn't a good division. All right. The rest of the teams were just mid, literally. So I wasn't really expecting anything from the Bucs here. So when the offense started off slow for them, essentially what a total of 3 yards on those first two drives, I wasn't surprised. Now I know coming off of that game against Washington last week, Cowboys looked like doo doo. I did expect them to come out a little bit better, but that first drive, especially, I was like, man, this might be rough. You get an incomplete pass the first time, uh, three incompletes, but one of them was dropped, and then two of them drops, and then just one just gone. So it was just not a good drive, and I'm just like, that's how you start the game. Like you can't get one pass completed to start the game. Only took like 13 seconds off the clock too, and I'm like, the Bu- the Bucks might be able to steal this one if the Cowboys gonna look like that. Maybe they hadn't woken up after what happened to them last week, but if they started the game like that and continued that way, it would have been rough. And then obviously their next drive, they did nothing again. I mean, Pollard got a decent run, but then that took a big sack on 3rd and 7. Obviously, you can't do anything there, punting it away, and now there's two straight drives for the Cowboys where you're not really doing anything, which is not what I expected coming into the game compared to the Bucs, who I did expect that from. But from there on, Cowboys ended the half as strong as you can possibly get. Besides the extra point misses, three straight touchdowns to end the half, all 80-yard drives or more. That last one being 91 yards. So, and in these drives, the first one and the third one didn't even take that long either. So they were able to move the ball fast, move it efficiently. Whereas the Bucs, you mentioned this when you were talking earlier about Brady's turnover. That really killed him because at that point it was only 6-0. The game was obviously still in hand at that point. Second quarter, game still in hand. You could have gotten a touchdown, assuming you made the extra point there. You'd be up 7-6, and we might be talking about a different game from there. But instead, you throw a pick in the end zone, which is not what we were expecting from Tom Brady at all. I don't know if he was trying to throw it away. I know they showed on the replay that it looked like he might have been trying to get it to Chris Godwin, I think. But either way, it was a bad throw from Tom. Got intercepted, and Cowboys drove down, had a long way to go, but drove down the field, 9-minute drive almost, and they took it in for a touchdown. Obviously missed the extra point again. But then that last drive, of course, they got a touchdown again as well, 91-yard drive. So as we saw from this weekend, obviously games are not over at halftime, but this one really felt like this was over at halftime. I mean, the only reason the Bucs even had a chance in this game is just because it's Tom Brady. He had comebacks are in his DNA, blah blah blah. But the Bucs offense was just bad. Once again, they couldn't run the ball. Tom Brady throwing the ball 60 something times is not what we're supposed to be doing here. And you throw it that many times and you only have 30 more yards passing than the Cowboys did. That really doesn't mean much. So as you said, stat padding, empty calories, whatever you want to call it. And again, not really surprised that the Bucs offense looked anemic like it has all year.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really say I'm super shocked with the Bucks thing. You recall last week that I did pick the Bucks in a weird gut feeling that Tom Brady might do something crazy, and I did specifically state that it wasn't the outcome that I wanted. So I enjoyed watching this game, regardless of knowing that my pick was going to be wrong. Because after the first few drives, I would say to back up Terrence's point, after Tom Brady's pick, I thought this is probably over, and it kind of was. But yeah, Tom Brady, 66 passing attempts. You only make 10 more than Dak did anyway, and you barely make up for the yards in that regard either. You also get sacked twice. Your yard loss ratio is kind of worse than his. worst passer rating. Dak just came out, caught fire, played really, really good, really well against what I would say, despite how anemic the Bucs offenses look, they've had a pretty strong defense, and Dak did not make them look that way. Um, Other parts for the Bucs, I mean, later on, you're going to turn away from this part of the game anyway, right? Because you need to pass and keep up time. But playoff Lenny was not there. 5 carries, 11 yards, no touchdown. Rashad White actually led in rushing. Only 2 more carries, 41 yards, so 30 more yards on 2 more carries. But they couldn't get anything going early on, right? You have those few early drives where everyone's punting, so there's a lot of use in the run game there. Right? I'm not expecting them to start using the run game in the fourth quarter when they're down 31-6. I don't expect that at all. But earlier on, when there's more space in the game, even when it's just 12-0, that's still pretty doable. You can get the run game going, try to get some explosive runs because they're missing extra points, right? It's not that hard if you can get into the end zone to actually take that back from them. But the running game never gets going. The receivers have somewhat good games, but it all just feels empty, right? Everyone kind of picks up some stats, and the Bucs never do anything. They punt or turn it over on downs, trying to get all the way to the end zone. So some weird things going on in this game. But overall, I mean, look at the records. You have the 12-5 Cowboys and the 8-9 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? I'm not expecting the Bucs to come in here and do anything crazy. I thought if this was going to be a Tom Brady win, that I didn't expect to look inversed, right? I wasn't thinking the Bucs are going to kind of come in and win 31-14 or something like that. I thought it would be a slow, really kind of sad game like the first one between these two teams if the Bucs won. And I was happy to see the Cowboys come to life and have a good game and kind of see Brady here. They played how I thought they would play. As Terrence stated last week, their game against the Panthers was really a fluke game. That's not who they are, and you can see that on that passing attempt to Mike Evans at the end of the game. That's the same thing Brady did to us 3 times. Unfortunately, the Panthers defense, as far as defending plays like that, not great. Kind of dumb. C.J. Henderson looked terrible. Cowboys, on the other hand, tough enough pressure. I mean, Mike Evans did burn the defender. There's not really like the defense won that. But I mean, they'd forced them into that situation anyway. There's so much pressure on it. I really genuinely believe Mike Evans dropped that pass because he was just running so fast. He just knew he had to catch it and get in. Everything got ahead of him, and he wasn't able to pull it in. So yeah, not super shocking here. Just had to mention that I did call this as a Bucs win, but I definitely saw a Cowboys win as a huge possibility, and this is pretty much what I thought. Bucs offense not good. As long as the Cowboys play up to what they look like on paper, should be a good game going forward against this Niners team. We'll talk a little more in depth later. I will say though the Cowboys are probably going to want a little more from Zeke. Tony Pollard doing great is great, but they do prosper a lot from having both of them kind of look somewhat even, which they didn't look that and recently. And I think I saw something earlier in the last 40 carries, Zeke has been quite behind Pollard. But overall, there's not many mistakes for the Cowboys to worry about having to fix from this game, right? Don't do what you did in the first few drives. You're not going to be able to do that against a team like the Niners, or you're going to fall way behind. And you can't miss 4 extra points. We've covered that enough, so I'll kind of leave that there. But I mean, there's a few mistakes the Cowboys can look at, but overall, once they caught fire, they played a pretty good, flawless playoff game against the Buccaneers, whose defense I do think is a formidable defense.
Yeah, I mean, they had a couple drives in the second that didn't like do anything, but I mean, it really didn't matter. They were up 24-0 at one point when they punted, and then another drive they were up 31-6 where they punted. So like, who cares? It really didn't matter. It was near the end of the game. Like they weren't really trying that hard at that point anyway. Um, so yeah, I mean, really, from you know the first 5 minutes or whatever, take that out, and then the last 5 minutes, Cal essentially played a perfect game. So obviously didn't turn the ball over, scoring on essentially every drive that they had in that time frame, getting an interception in the end zone, forcing a turnover on downs late in the game as well. At that last drive for the Bucs, I mean, they did pretty much exactly what they should have done, considering they don't have a chance to win this division in the last week of the season. So it's not like this would have been an upset if the Cowboys came out here and won, which they did. So do I think they'll be able to repeat this next week? No, definitely not. We'll get into that later. But the only thing I really would say is, yeah, Zeke. I really don't know. This whole season, we've been kind of discussing, whenever we talk about the Cowboys, should Tony Pollard take over the full time starting job from Zeke. We've kind of been like, no, I don't think we really should. Tony Pollard's been really good, but to say he should take over the starting job completely is a little much. That being said, I mean, it's been a little rough for Zeke as of late, and especially in this game. I mean, essentially averaging 2 yards a carry, having almost as many carries as Tony Pollard, but having 50 less yards. It's just not going to cut it. I don't know if it's the blocking. I don't know. Obviously, Zeke doesn't have the same burst that he used to, and he doesn't have the burst that Tony Pollard does. But it's just not working right now. I'm not really sure what it is. And even when Zeke has really been good this season, Tony's had more yards on a little bit on fewer carries. But that's just kind of how it is with how they're built at this point, with how Zeke is at this point in his career. But you can't have a game like this out of him because you're going to need to be full throttle against the 49ers offense and that defense, especially if we want to go out there and take it from in San Francisco. So, besides, the slow start at the beginning, obviously, and, Zeke could do a little bit better in the running game. I mean, they played a pretty good game, and hats off to Dallas.